Think about the last time you walked into a room and someone sized you up in about 2 seconds. Maybe it was a job interview, a first meeting with a new boss, a negotiation where the other side glanced at you, made a quick judgment, and moved on like they'd already figured out exactly who they were dealing with. And maybe, if you're honest about it, that judgment was wrong. Not wrong in a flattering way. Wrong in the direction of less capable, less prepared, less of a threat than you actually were. Most people spend real energy trying to correct that, trying to make sure the room understands, immediately, exactly how much they bring to the table. Credentials get mentioned earlier than they need to be. Achievements get worked into small talk. The handshake gets firmer. The voice gets a little louder. The posture straightens. All in an unconscious effort to close the gap between what someone assumes about you and what's actually true. But there's a different kind of person in that same room. Someone who notices the same misjudgment happening to them and does nothing to correct it. Not because they don't care. Not because they're passive. Because they've learned something most people never stop to consider. Being underestimated isn't a problem to be solved. In the right hands, it's a resource to be spent. And once you understand why that's true, once you see the actual mechanics of what happens when someone lets a room misjudge them, you're going to start noticing this pattern everywhere. In your workplace, in your negotiations, in rooms you've already been in dozens of times without realizing what was actually happening around you. Social observation. There's a specific kind of person you've probably worked with or watched from a distance. They don't dominate the conversation in their first meeting. They don't lead with their resume. They let other people talk more, ask more questions than they answer, and generally come across as a little quieter, a little less impressive than they probably are. If you've worked alongside someone like that for long enough, you've likely had the experience of being genuinely caught off guard the first time you actually saw what they were capable of. The quiet hire who solves the problem nobody else could. The soft-spoken negotiator who walks out with terms nobody expected them to get. The person who let everyone assume they were the least dangerous person in the room and turned out to be exactly the opposite. Now think about the other kind of person. The one who makes absolutely sure, from the first 30 seconds of any interaction, that you know what they've accomplished, what they know, and how seriously you should take them. Both people might be equally capable, but they're not treated the same way by the people around them. And more importantly, they are not prepared in the same way by the people around them. The person who announces their capability gets met with caution. People watch them more closely. They get challenged more directly because the room has already decided this is someone worth measuring carefully. The person who lets themselves be underestimated gets met with something far more useful: a relaxed room, fewer defenses, less scrutiny. People stop preparing for them because the room has already decided incorrectly that there's nothing here that requires preparation. That gap between what people think you are and what you're actually capable of isn't a misunderstanding to fix. It's space, and the people who understand power don't rush to fill it. If you're already thinking about someone who does this, or maybe realizing you've been trying too hard to close that gap yourself, stay with this one. Hit subscribe and drop a like, because what we're getting into next is exactly why this works, and the psychology behind it is more deliberate than most people ever realize. Here's what almost nobody tells you about being underestimated. It's not really about what other people think of you. It's about what they stop doing because of what they think. When someone decides you're not a threat, not particularly impressive, or not worth their full attention, they don't just form an opinion. They change their behavior. They stop watching as closely. They stop preparing contingencies for you. They get looser, more careless, and less guarded because guarding against you doesn't feel necessary anymore. That shift in behavior is the entire value of being underestimated. It has almost nothing to do with your ego, your reputation, or how good it feels to be recognized. It has everything to do with the fact that an unguarded opponent, an unguarded negotiator, or an unguarded colleague gives you information and room to maneuver that a guarded one never will. And here's the part that takes this from interesting to genuinely strategic. The gap between perceived capability and actual capability isn't something that happens to you. It's something that can be allowed, shaped, and used without a single lie ever being told. Nobody has to deceive anyone for this to work. You don't need to fake incompetence or pretend to be something you're not. You simply need to resist the very natural, very human urge to correct an assumption that happens to be working in your favor. That restraint, doing nothing, saying nothing, when every instinct wants you to set the record straight, is harder than it sounds. And understanding exactly why it works on a psychological level is what separates people who stumble into this advantage by accident from people who use it deliberately. Every time it matters. Scientific explanation. Let's get into the actual psychology behind why this works. The foundation here is something psychologist Solomon Asch demonstrated decades ago in his research on impression formation. People form judgments about others extremely quickly, often within the first few seconds of contact, and those early impressions disproportionately shape everything that follows. This is sometimes called the primacy effect. The first information we receive about someone carries far more weight in our overall judgment than information that arrives later, even when the later information is more accurate or more complete. What this means practically is that an early impression of unremarkable or unthreatening doesn't just fade neutrally over time. It actively filters how later evidence gets interpreted. If a room decides early that you're not particularly capable, your later competence often gets explained away as luck, as a fluke, or as someone else's contribution, rather than updating the original impression. The first read sticks, and everything after it gets bent to fit. There's a related concept from social psychologist Susan Fiske's research, known as the Stereotype content model, which found that people evaluate others along two primary dimensions, warmth and competence. Critically, Fiske's research shows that high warmth combined with lower perceived competence, appearing friendly, modest, unthreatening, actually produces more trust and less defensive behavior from others than high perceived competence alone. People relax around those they perceive as warm and unthreatening. They don't relax around those they perceive as highly competent and a little distant, even when that perception isn't fair. This connects to a much older strategic principle, one that long predates modern psychology. The idea, attributed to the ancient military strategist Sun Tzu, that appearing weak when you are actually strong creates opportunities that an open display of strength never can. This isn't really about psychology. It's about information asymmetry, a concept used across economics and game theory to describe situations where one party in an interaction has more relevant information than the other. When someone misjudges your capability, an information asymmetry exists, and asymmetries in negotiation, in competition, in any adversarial or semi-adversarial context, tend to favor whoever knows more than the other side realizes. There's also a behavioral angle worth understanding. When people believe they're dealing with a weaker counterpart, their own behavior measurably relaxes. They negotiate less carefully. They reveal more information than they intend to, and they make decisions with less due diligence. This is a well-documented pattern in negotiation research. Perceived power and balance changes behavior on both sides. The perceived stronger party becomes looser and more exposed, while the perceived weaker party, if they're paying attention, gains access to information and openings that a fully guarded interaction would never produce. Put all of this together, and the picture is clear. Being underestimated isn't just a social experience. It's a structural advantage. It changes what other people do, not just what they think. And what they do is the only part of this that actually matters. Let's bring this into real situations. Example 1, the negotiation. You're across the table from someone who's clearly decided, based on your tone, your age, your industry, or just a quick read of the room, that you're not going to push back hard. Old pattern. You feel the urge to correct that immediately. You mention your experience. You name drop a deal you closed. You make sure they understand exactly who they're dealing with, and in doing so, you hand them a more accurate read of your position before the negotiation has even started. New pattern. You let the assumption stand. You ask more questions than you answer. You let them talk and reveal their constraints and show you their floor before you've shown them yours. By the time the real negotiation starts, you know significantly more about their position than they know about yours, not because you tricked them, but because you simply didn't rush to close the information gap they handed you for free. Example 2, the new role. You start a new job, and within the first few weeks, it's clear that a couple of colleagues have quietly decided you are not a major factor, not incompetent, just unremarkable, someone to be polite to, but not someone whose opinion changes much. Old pattern. You push to be seen immediately, volunteering for visible projects, making sure your wins get noticed in real time, correcting the underestimation as fast as possible. New pattern. You let that initial read stand for a while longer than feels comfortable. You watch how decisions actually get made. You learn who really has influence versus who just appears to. And when you do step in on the one project where your input actually changes the outcome, it lands with far more force because nobody was bracing for it. Example 3, the family dynamic. There's a sibling, a parent, or an old friend who decided years ago and never really updated the read that you're the less capable one in some specific area. Old pattern. You spend family gatherings trying to prove them wrong, bringing up your accomplishments, correcting the narrative every chance you get. New pattern. You let it go. You stop performing your competence for an audience that already made up its mind, and you simply use the energy you would have spent proving yourself on actually building the thing you're trying to build. The correction, if it ever comes, happens through results they can't argue with, not through a defense they were never going to accept anyway. Example 4, the competitor who never saw it coming. In business or sports, there's almost always a favorite, the competitor everyone is watching, preparing for, and building strategy around. And there's almost always someone treated as an afterthought. Old pattern. The afterthought spends their energy trying to get taken seriously before the actual competition starts, campaigning for respect instead of preparing. New pattern. The afterthought lets the room underestimate them completely, uses the lack of scrutiny to prepare without resistance, and lets the result do the talking. By the time anyone adjusts their expectations, the outcome is already decided. Has someone underestimated you, and it actually worked in your favor later? Tell us about that moment in the comments. We want to know exactly how it played out. Real talk revelation. Here's the deeper question worth sitting with. Why does correcting an underestimation feel so urgent in the first place? For most people, it's not really about strategy. It's about an old, very human discomfort with being misread. Somewhere along the way in school, in families, and in early jobs, most of us learned that being seen accurately mattered. That if people didn't recognize what we were capable of, opportunities would pass us by. Credit would go to someone else, and we'd be stuck quietly proving ourselves over and over with nothing to show for it. That fear isn't irrational. In a lot of environments, being overlooked really does cost you something. But the instinct creates the need to correct every misjudgment in real time. The discomfort of letting an inaccurate impression sit there unchallenged doesn't actually distinguish between situations where correction matters and situations where letting it ride is the more strategic move. The people who use underestimation, well, aren't people who don't care about being seen accurately. They've just learned to separate two different needs. The need to be recognized, which is emotional, and the need to be effective, which is practical. And they've learned that in a lot of situations, those two needs actually point in opposite directions. The moment you most want to correct a record is often the exact moment correcting it costs you the advantage you didn't even realize you had. This isn't about suppressing your ego forever. It's about recognizing when the urge to be seen is about to cost you the thing you actually came into the room to get. The discomfort of staying quiet while someone underrates you is real, but it's temporary, and it's almost always smaller than the cost of giving up the advantage that silence creates. Emotional conclusion. So here's what I want you to actually carry out of this video. The next time you feel that familiar pull, the urge to correct someone's low opinion of your capability, to make sure they know exactly who they're dealing with, pause before you act on it. Ask yourself a simple question. Does this person actually need to know what I'm capable of right now? Or would I get more out of this situation by letting them keep believing what they already believe? That single pause That moment of choosing not to correct the record is where real strategic power lives. Not in proving yourself constantly, in knowing exactly when proving yourself is worth the cost and when it isn't. Being underestimated was never actually about you. It was about what the other person stopped doing because of what they believed. And the people who understand that hold a kind of quiet advantage that the loudest person in the room will never have access to because they're too busy making sure everyone already knows exactly what they're worth. Next time, we're going somewhere that connects directly to this. Why some of the most powerful people you'll ever meet almost never explain themselves, and what that habit is actually protecting. Subscribe so you don't miss it.